Oops, too far. Hi, my name is Garrett, and welcome to my YouTube channel. And today we're going to talk about the Wizard War in Walrus. When looking at a faction in Walrus, there's a few key things that I want to talk about for each faction. One is going to be, I want to make sure that each faction feels thematically unique. So the Wizard War is based entirely around the concept of different archmagi, however you want to say it, grand wizards who have their own senile opinions on what magic should be used for or how best to use magic. And they're very power hungry, and they go around fighting each other. And the whole idea is they're using the silliest, most ridiculous spells based either on like memes or anything else that like I can pull from to create flavorful and wild like at game interactions. But the key twist is that when you're building a warband for them, you're actually bringing two competing wizards in your warband. So they are a flex faction. They are kind of the epitome of a flex faction in this game. They are not hyper elite, and they're not a large horde. They're somewhere in the middle, and they're all about being able to adapt to what your opponent has brought and then go the other way. So if I bring an avowed list, so thinking about that, I haven't made quests yet for the Wizard War. So if you have an idea for a wizard faction quest, drop it below down in the comments, because I'd love to see your ideas. And one is using 5 spells successfully. So you have to use 5 unique spells in a game, which is not easy to pull off at the beginning of the game because your warband probably doesn't know more than 3 or 4 spells. But later on in a campaign, it's going to be a cinch. So it's a great one for like early on. It's going to be challenging, but it gets easier the longer you play. The other option is Wizard War, is, you know, placeholder name for the Wizard War faction. But before deployment, you actually put a wizard in your opponent's warband, so they get one. And if you defeat that wizard, you get 3 victory points. But if you don't, they just get that wizard. It's in their warband now. It's just a grunt wizard, very, you know, simple. But those are some faction quests that I've thought of. I also want to have like something to do with like recovering an ancient like spell component, or harvesting a spell component, or like a monster fight where you need to like defeat a monster that appears on the field, and if you do, you get like a bonus to spell casting in the next game or something like that, like to kind of reflect that you're needing special components to cast your spells. And maybe something to do with like having wizards who are fighting each other and infighting each other, like something to do with the fighting the wizards. Anyways, and then I think also like learning spells is another thing that I want them to do, because in this game, if your model sees a spell get cast successfully, they can attempt to learn that spell. And if they succeed in following games, they're going to be able to use that spell as well. So that's how like your wizards can grow in power, or anyone who has a magical score can do this. So any model that has a magic score is considered a wizard, or like, and they're able to use wizards and wizard spells. But the point of that is then you can also have wizards share magic as well during a match. And instead of trying to like pass or partially succeed on a check to observe something, you can instead just have an interaction roll. And you know, your opponent, if they're wanting it, they can just, you know, choose to fail the interaction roll. It's not contested, and they can just share spells back and forth. So you can set up matches with opponents so that your wizards are actually learning from them, and it's not just about battling and taking these objectives. You might lose the game, but actually your wizard is more powerful for it, right? So you're able to learn things, and all wizards, regardless of faction. So if you have a magic score, you're a wizard. You are able to, you know, handle that. The other thing to keep in mind is a faction trick, like a qualification for the Wizard War faction is their wizards fight other wizards first. So if there's unless there's an easier target. So if I'm bringing wizards and I have my spell scribe is going to cast a spell, the target of that spell, if my opponent has a model with a magic score, has to be that model with a magic score unless there's an easier target in like my effective range of that spell. Let's talk models. So models that are available to you in the Wizard War faction at the moment is the boss. So looking at leaders, you have your boss wizard, as I'm calling them right now. They might turn into the archmagus or archmagi, depending on the persuasion of single or plural. You are allowed to bring 2 leaders, which is different from the other factions. And the reason you bring 2 is because they fight each other, and they're very powerful, but it's a risk reward, because if they're near each other, they're going to fight each other. But if they're away from each other, if you split them up, they will go do their own things, and they're very powerful. Because they have, 4 hit points, they have a speed of 2, so they're running d6s when they move. They have a BS of 0, a CS of 0, a magic skill of 2, so they start with d6s in their magic skill, interact of 1. They come with defense 1 from light armor there. So their equipment is they have light armor, which gives them that +1 bonus to defense. They have a feeble combat weapon in case someone gets too close to them, they can stab or hit them with a stick. And then they've got a pondering orb, because a wizard's always got to ponder their orb, and they've got a spell book. Spell books are a +1 to whatever you roll on your magic die. It's just one of those passive items that gives a buff. There's lots of little buff items in this game, and considered opposing models for all magic rules, spells, effects. But boss wizards must target other boss wizards before any other models, if possible. So the original faction, like the overall faction, wizards must fight wizards first. There's now boss wizards must fight boss wizards first. So the idea is they're all looking for someone who is a real test of their skill, someone they can really like show off to, right? They can go all out with their magic, and someone will actually appreciate it and stick around long enough to see the whole incantation rather than just get fried by their, piddly spells. Now, speaking of spells, the boss wizard, you get Snail, which is a spell that I talked about earlier, where you pick a target, and if you succeed or partially succeed, they get cursed with a snail. And if you partially succeed, that snail shows up in the next match that player has, as opposed to if you fully succeed, that snail shows up now in the game, right now, right? And the snail is just going to follow that target that you picked until that snail makes contact with them. And once that snail does, that model's dead. It's gone. And it's completely removed from your opponent's warband. The other option is they have a choice of spells between Testicular Torsion or Mama's Mangiest Mongrel. I don't like either of those words yet. They're placeholder spell names. But basically, one is a single target, very high damage spell that also slows movement. I figure you can guess which one that is. Or turns the target into a werewolf. So Mama's Mangiest Mongrel literally will create a werewolf. It is its own model type, and when you curse them, they keep coming back. They have to see when they bring that model onto the battlefield in future matches if that model comes on as the model itself or as the werewolf model. So it gives your opponent a little bit more kit bashing and more of a narrative bringing forward, right? At the moment, I don't have any like clear spell condition type items or abilities or things like that, because we're in playtesting mode and I wanted to just stick around. Inevitably, we're probably going to have an item or a spell that lets you clear a condition on a model, right? So, if my model's affected by lycanthropy, all right, we've got something that'll clear lycanthropy, right? But that doesn't exist yet because I just haven't added that to the item list. Anywho, that's your only leader at the moment, is the boss wizard. Now moving on to specials. You have a few specials because the idea is this allows you to either buff up certain types of models, like you really want to focus on your boss wizards, or you want to focus on just your rank and file wizards. So you've got a familiar, which is a small little, buddy that follows a wizard around, and actually when a wizard moves, the familiar moves because it stays with their, the familiar stays with their wizard. And really what they're there for is they just improve your spellcasting. So they're just there to improve your spellcasting. They also help with morale. And they also help with when you're activating back and forth, it gives you something to activate rather than your important pieces. Because often in skirmish games, what will happen is players will activate all their unimportant pieces first, leaving, in the action economy of it all, leaving their more important pieces to the end. When everything else has left, your opponent has less of a chance to respond. That's when you drop in the important pieces. That's when you take the objective, right? So having familiars lets the wizards balance out, oh, do I want to use the cheap familiar just because I'm drawing out, I want to wait a little longer and have my opponent move their models closer together so my fireball hits more models. The familiar lets you play with your action economy a little bit. It gives you more choice and it gives you more models. But it's just improving the magic die by 1 for whatever wizard it's floating around, right? So you link it to a wizard and it stays with that wizard through the whole campaign. The next model that's a special for the Wizard War that I have is the Spell Scribe. Now, the Spell Scribe, you know how we talked about that models can learn spells? The Spell Scribe does it better. Their whole point is that they have advantage on trying to learn new spells, so you want to park them somewhere where they can watch the battlefield, and they're going to watch opponent spellcasters, and they're going to learn spells. But then what do you do with that, right? Then just the Spell Scribe knows all those spells. Well, later in the game, you can have them voluntarily, if you get them next to another wizard, they can teach that wizard those spells. Or you can have them go back to the next model, which is a mobile spell cart. Think of it as like a librarian cart. As you know, you got all the books on it and you're going to go reshelve them. So the Spell Scribe learns a bunch of spells and takes them to the mobile spell cart. That thing doesn't move. You plop it down in a match within a certain area and it stays there. I'm debating about the idea that like a model can move it, but it doesn't move on its own. And when you plop it down, that is just a repository that any of your wizards can come up to and interact with it and swap out spells. So if your boss wizard doesn't want Snail anymore, but would really like to learn a new spell, I don't know, maybe there's one that the Spell Scribe observed from the Avowed faction and is like, oh, that Arcane Blast that the Prophet just did that my Spell Scribe saw and took to the mobile spell rack, I'm going to have all my other wizards go to the mobile spell rack and learn Arcane Blast. And now all of my wizards know this spell and can use it right now in this game. So that is a another way that you can like learn spells, and that is what this model is for. Because it's a special, the mobile spell cart can level up and it can improve. So what's really funny there is there are ways you can maybe manipulate it or use it to improve its stats. And then could you imagine if the mobile spell cart had a ranged damage value and you equipped it with a ranged weapon? I mean, like, this is stuff that I want to see how it plays out in campaigns and see how players use it in creative, weird ways. It's one of those things that it's called like, in game design, there's sometimes things called like a piece, where it's just put in or like a tool or a toy, right? Like you put it in. There's only one basic for the Wizard War right now. I think I'd like to make 2 or 3, but right now it's just the grunt. It's just your basic wizard. This is someone who's picked up an orb in a spell book and says, I'm off on a grand adventure in the Wizard War. So they are, 1 hit point, D4 for their speed, magic skill 3. They're very powerful. I might nerf that a little bit. Bring that down to a 2 just to start, but they are grunts, so they don't level up. So a 3 might work. Then they have an interact score of 1, no armor. If you want, you can always buy armor and put it on them, but they're grunts. And then they have a feeble weapon for close combat, maybe a stick or a wand or a stabby. And then they've got their Pondering Orb and their spellbook. And finally, their spells, right now in playtesting, they just know Fireball, which is just a big damage spell. It's Fireball, the same frickin' spell that we've had in fantasy games since the 1970s. Which the rules should be available for free in the comment, down in the description, in the doobly-doo, as some folks say, down below. So that's something to check out as well. Now let's talk. I keep mentioning the Pondering Orb. You know, you have to be up pondering your orbs when you're wizards, and that's an item. So a unique item for the Wizard War faction is the Pondering Orb. Spellbooks are for everybody, but the Pondering Orb is for wizards only. Now, the Pondering Orb is an item that, as a long action, you can make a magic check, and on a 2+, you improve the magic skill of any wizards that are aligned with the wizard that did this casting, this action, by +1. So what happens is you can have a wizard activate early on in a round, ponder their orb. All of your other wizards gain +1 to their magic die. If they're a grunt, that means they've just gone from a D8 to a D10 casting spells. So pondering with your orb is also cumulative. So if you really had a bunch in a range and you all, like most of them all succeeded, the last one could be rolling with a D12. Even if they were a boss wizard starting at a D6, they could be rolling with a D12 right out of the gate. The thing is, you had to give up all those activations to get that buff. So the Pondering Orb is something just it's something that's a tool piece that I'm excited to see how people play with it. I do want to keep it as a long action for right now, because otherwise I think it's too overtuned if it's just spells for a moment. So spells are not unique to wizards, but there are unique wizard spells. And more importantly, there's a couple of different spell keywords. One of them, the thing I know I want to have in the game, is the cryptic keyword. And the cryptic keyword means that only a wizard, so it has to be a model with a magic score of more than 0, so 1+, only a wizard of the Wizard War faction. So you can't be a wizard from the Avowed, can learn that spell. And you can't do it in the middle of a game. So that really just isolates those key wizard spells and slows down the passing of like really over the top ridiculous spells from almost like, and so the only models that have those spells at the start of the game are wizards from the Wizard War faction. Drop them in the comments. I love, like, or memes specifically. Like, if you know, like, Wizard War memes or anything like that, drop them in the comments so I can go find those memes and learn from them, because I'm wanting to include really silly stuff like that. Maybe even summon Walrus. I think that'd be fun, given the name of the game. Summon Walrus. What does it do? It summons a walrus. Why? Walrus. So I'll have to figure that out. But that's been a look at the Wizard War faction. I'm really excited about this cabal of just power-hungry mages off on a quest to destroy every other mage in the world. See you next time.